Hey, deserving listeners, it's time for me to react to your comments from my videos from last week. Let's get to it. Gino and Jasmine. Chaos says, I also have insecurities about my hair type and would always wear a beanie in school. It got to the point where they had to stop writing me up at school because I wouldn't listen to them when they told me to take my hat off. Yeah, well, yeah. And I don't understand the whole hat thing, really. I mean, I kind of get it, but on the other hand, it's like, can't we just allow some people to wear hats sometimes, especially when they express they're insecure about taking their hat off? Like, as long as it's not like a giant hat that interferes with things. Like, it's just a cultural notion that isn't shared by everyone. It's not like a scientific fact that you have to take your hat off at the dinner table or you have to take your hat off at school. Some people will say, well, there are safety concerns, like you could hide stuff in there. But I mean, let's be real. You could hide stuff in a lot of places on one's body. So I don't know. I just feel like for some people, you should provide an accommodation and provide therapy so that they can feel like they're an okay person, even though their hair type, as Chaos you're talking about, might be, you know, well, so there's so many levels to this. To attack the person like Gino or Chaos, as you know, you're writing in, for wearing a hat all the time is the wrong effort. What we should be doing is helping everyone to feel better about their bodies and their heads. And we should also be attacking society for attacking those people while attacking society. We should be trying to stop society from attacking people about their bodies in general, including the way their head looks, so that people feel compelled to wear a hat in order just to survive. So you know, it's like someone who's being bullied at school will get bad grades and then you punish them. It's like, well, that's the wrong person you're supposed to be going after. And, you know, whatever you think about Gino, he represents that sort of individual who feels extremely insecure based on societal messages. There's a lot of societal messages around men and hair and balding and shame and age and lack of sexuality. You know, balding men are sometimes seen as like grandfathers and thus not a sexual object. And a lot of men, of course, want to be considered sexually attractive. And so we just have to stop that. Good old political troll says, Tobias Funke was a never nude. Gino is a never bald. Yeah, except he's not wearing a jean hat. I actually had a jean hat. Maybe I'll include that right here. One of my very first purchases in the 70s when I was a kid at Pike Place Market in Seattle was this funky jean hat that I'll show a picture of right here. And I was on cloud nine when my parents bought this. I saw this hat. I was like, I need to have that hat. It's basically made up of old Levi jeans. And I thought I was going to wear this thing all the time. And I thought, oh, you know, in the second grade or something, I'm like, I'm going to be, you know, funky jean hat guy. And I'm going to wear it to school. And that's my thing. You know, that's my identity. I'm the hat guy. I think I probably wore it once and just never wore it again. Anyway, I think I had that hat for 20 years. Always wondering, like, when would there be a moment where I could really rock that hat and have people go like, yeah, there goes a cool guy with a jean hat. Valos says, culture is so interesting. As a Jewish person, men are required. So, by the way, just going back to political troll, Arrested Development, Tobias Funke, he's a never nude, meaning he's shamed of his body and he refuses to be nude, so he wears these very tight jean shorts to under everything that he wears. Anyway, Valos says, culture is so interesting. As a Jewish person, men are required to cover their heads for meals and prayer, so I had to explain this to friends who came over for dinner. Right, so what Valos is saying is that in a lot of cultures, it's extremely rude to wear a hat at dinner. In other cultures, it's rude not to wear a hat, which just shows you that, as you say, Valos, culture is so interesting. EE says, super common Hispanic household. It's super common in Hispanic households for parents to be strict with the girls of the family, the daughters. My mom would literally never let me go anywhere alone and didn't let me have a boyfriend. Right, so they're talking about how For Jasmine, they were talking about how Jasmine's mom was very strict, and I was wondering, what does that mean? I'm just looking for why does Jasmine seem to exhibit preoccupied attachment. Of course, I don't know if she has that, but she had signs of that earlier in the season. With regards to the photograph, the nude photograph, I think she had a very appropriate reaction to that. I mean, there's various different reactions one could have, but I didn't think there was anything indicative of attachment insecurity, and her reaction was completely appropriate to the situation. But the decoration earlier on, or the demanding to follow him around, berating him for talking to a woman at a restaurant, that's all indicative of preoccupied attachment and hypervigilance about losing your partner. Mike and Jimena video. Shay Davis says, I can really relate to falling out of love overnight in dating scenarios. So it seems as though Jimena might have been in love and then fell out of love. It's hard to know. But Shay says, I can really relate to falling out of love overnight in dating scenarios. It can be very tough because there can be a lot of self-blame and blame from the other person, especially claims like, well, you never loved me. I wish people were more accepting of feelings changing without rewriting history and claiming they never really existed. Right. So this is something that is apparently either cultural or a human bias, that when someone breaks up with us, we go from 1 minute feeling like our partner loves us, and then our partner breaks up with us, and we go to the next minute thinking they never loved us. And it's somehow harder to see the gray zone, which is, well, they absolutely did love me in the beginning, but somehow they fell out of love with me. I think it's also just hard to imagine, like, well, why would you fall out of love with me? Like, I'm still the same person. How do you love me for 3 years or 20 years and then suddenly you don't love? I don't understand. People will even do this to themselves. We will find people totally in love, and you ask them, are you in love? You're like, yeah, 100%. And of course, it's a subjective experience. There's no scientific measure of being in love, but it's a subjective personal experience. But when someone's saying, I'm totally in love, and they're an adult and they understand what love is, that kind of thing. And then they have some bad years and then they divorce, and you ask them, were you ever in love? They'll say, no, I was never in love, even though they had 20 years of reporting they were in love. So you'll have it kind of go either way. And I think it hinders our ability to, one, see reality, and two, heal from these kinds of relationships, as I often talk about, because as you're saying, Shay, you break up with someone and you're saying, I did love you for sure, but I fell out of love with you. And that, of course, when you're being dumped, it's just hard to accept that. But eventually, after you get over the shock of it, you would hope that people would be able to at least consider that as a possibility, right? That people fall out of love. Jimena, because what people are saying is Jimena, she clearly never was in love with him. She's just scamming him. She always was. This is all evidence of that. And okay, maybe. But it's also very possible that she was in love with him, deeply in love with him, and then fell out of love with him. And that happens sometimes. And sometimes it's not really, you can't really point to anything as to why that would happen. And the problem is that when we are being dumped and we rewrite history, as you say, Shay, about our partner, we invent a reality in which we were duped, in which someone lied to us for 7 years, in which I can't trust my own gut in terms of gauging whether or not someone loves me or not. And so that's a huge, just imagine if you did everything right in a relationship, and then I just told you and convinced you and brainwashed you that you don't understand how to gauge love, that you're a terrible picker of partners, and that human beings cannot be trusted. That's a huge, it's going to affect you. It's going to affect your trust in yourself. It's going to affect your trust in other people, when in the real story is much more accurate and also much less damaging to your trust in self and others. It's just like, they were in love with me and then they fell out of love with me at some point. And the other thing is, as someone who fought, if you're the one falling out of love with someone, sometimes it's important to just say to yourself and to the other person, I don't know why, but I just fell out of love with you. I don't, maybe it's just my phase of life. Because what often people will do is they will latch onto things like burping or something, and we'll say, well, that's what, or you gained weight or whatever. You identify these things, and maybe they were factors, but it's hard to know. especially when they kind of had those things to begin with. Anyway, point is that I relate to you, Shay, quite a bit. And somehow it's just like the notion just isn't out there enough. And it just seems like one of those universal experiences. Like I would venture to say like 98% of people have had this experience, maybe not falling out of love, but falling out of like with someone. I would imagine that everyone at some point is like, you know, very much into someone, having a crush or whatever, or fully in love for 20 years. And then at a certain point, it just ends. And I think it maybe as I'm talking about it, it's threatening, right? Because it's like, well, if it's sort of amorphous and it could just sort of end at any point, then that means that my partner could leave me at any point. My partner could just wake up one day and fall out of love with me. And the thing I'll say is, yeah, it's not likely to happen, especially if you're, you know, mutually paying attention to the relationship and getting your needs met together, and that your life isn't falling apart in other ways, and you don't have a lot of traumas in your past, and you go to therapy when you need to. You know, there's a lot of things you can do to stave it off, but there's no guarantee. At any point, someone could just fall out of love with you, and it's just hard to know why that happens. And that's very scary, but that's life. Same, you know, there's certain givens in life, taxes and death, and, you know, the possibility of someone falling out of love with you. It's not pleasant, but we also need to have other things in our life so that if that ever does happen, that it doesn't ruin our life in its entirety. It'll hurt, of course, but we have other aspects of our life, including ourselves, that we can depend on. Anyway, Jan says, I don't know if Dr. Honda cares, but there's been a he said, she said thing going on between Jimena and Mike. Jimena said she met him on a cam site and he fell for her and said she should stop doing cam. And he would pay for her stuff in return for her stopping doing her cam work. Hence why she said she quit her job after she met Mike, but Mike said they met on a dating site. End of comment. Right, so people have been emailing me these reports, and it's always hard to know if any of it is true. But the claims or the reports are that the real story of Mike and Jimena was that they met on a cam site, meaning that Jimena was I don't know if you call it like a porn actress or a kind of like a version of a sex worker where you're online, like over Zoom essentially, and your clients are over camera, and you pay like, you know, a fee or something, and sometimes you can develop in fact, one of my very first dissertation ideas, you know, 15 years ago or something, was about this, because it was a relatively new thing, at least to me and my knowledge. And what was my angle? I wanted to study I think I wanted to find out if people considered it cheating. Was that what I was doing? Anyway, because it was in between. It was like, it's on the internet, and it's kind of, because a lot of people don't consider pornography. Many people do, but a lot of people don't, you know. So a lot of people, not everyone of course, will consider if you date someone else, that's cheating, if you're in an exclusive monogamous relationship. But if you look at pornography, that's not cheating. Well, what if you are online and you're looking at pornography, but the person is actually there, and you're actually, you know, you can see each other? Or what if you can only see them? Or what if you knew that, you know, you were a customer to real, like OnlyFans or something, and you actually emailed and said, I'll pay you X amount of dollars if you do this kind of video, but you never have a video. You know, I was just wondering about what are the statistics, because in the past, before the internet, there were only a few different ways one could cheat. And with texting, and then now with these kinds of other sites, cheating, the avenues for cheating are so much more broad. There's so many more options. And so as a culture, we might not have caught up yet. We might not have, because I actually would have clients that would have this as a problem, where the cam site would be utilized by one of the partners, and the other partner would find out because they'd see the bill on the credit card bill or something, and then there'd be a fight about it. And sometimes the cheating partner would say, I didn't know this was a violation. I didn't realize that this would upset, you know, that kind of thing. Anyway, So that was years ago. And a side note, I actually went to my advisor and said, sort of gave him this idea. And I said, what do you think? And he says, well, so the dissertation subject that you choose is often mistaken for something that you do yourself. I can't remember what he said. Something along the lines of, now, there's nothing wrong with, doing these campsites, but do you want people to think, colleagues and other academic students, do you want them to think you're trying to justify you being a customer of campsites? And I was like, really? They're going to think that I'm just researching an aspect of society that happens to be related to this new thing that probably doesn't have a lot of research around. He's like, well, it's up to you, but people are going to assume things about you. And then I thought about it. I was like, well, I don't care if people assume that about me. It's not a crime. You know what I mean? But then I thought, do I really want? Anyway, so I switched to a different subject. But really, I was coming at it from the angle of a couples therapist, because I was seeing more and more of these kinds of quote unquote infidelities. Is what if you texted your former partner? Anyway, point is that we have reports that Mike was a customer of Jimena's cam site, and that seemingly the reports is that they developed a relationship that was more ongoing, where Jimena and Mike maybe even talked outside of the cam situation. And then allegedly, Mike asked Jimena, I will support you, and if you stop camming, if you quit your job, I want you to myself. And this is actually not an uncommon thing that'll happen to sex workers of various types, that someone will fall in love. And a lot of sex workers will report that when that happens, they're just like, oh, honey, I'm not interested in that. I'm only interested in you being a customer. I'm not interested in anything outside of that. And it's sweet that you like me that way. There's also a bit of a sexist thing that can happen sometimes, where men want to possess and own. Anyway, point is that this happens sometimes, but sometimes it actually is reciprocated, in that the sex worker is like, well, actually, I'm falling for you as well. I'm sure there's a movie about this somewhere. And allegedly, reportedly, this is what might have happened. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's totally fine. People can be cam people can be cam customers. I think that people online are, saying that this makes Mike into some sort of creep, and it's like, no, it doesn't make Mike a creep. He might be a creep, but this doesn't make him a creep. So then she quits her job, and then he starts supporting her as promised, because she's like, well, I'd like to be continuing to do cam work, but if you're going to prevent me from doing that because you want to be in a relationship with me and I'm going to pursue that, then you're going to have to make up for the fact that I can't pay my bills otherwise. You know what I mean? Again, I'm just speculating based on the reports that I don't even know if they're true. And then, so, that adds a detail to, and of course, if they were to report to the producers of 90 Day Fiancé, they either would lie to the producers so that they could get on the show, or they told the producers what the truth was, and the producer said, you should probably change that story, hence the claim that Mike met Jimena over a dating site. Who knows? Maybe they did meet over a dating site, and all this is just a bunch of silliness. But the other allegation about Mike is that he had a meltdown the first time they were, when the first time he went to Colombia, the first time he went to Colombia, him and Jimena, they both went out. So I'm trying to remember just off the top of my head. The claim was that they went out. This is according to someone saying that Jimena said this, or someone claiming to be Jimena online said this. Anyway, point is that the claim was that they went out to a club and they all got drunk, and when they got home, Mike was hurt about something, maybe jealous that she was dancing with someone else, or who knows. And that Mike had a meltdown and was like crying and throwing things in front of the kids, and might have even put hands on Jimena. And So there was that allegation. Who knows? And of course, if we talk to Mike, he would say, well, actually, who knows what happened, but there was a claim of that, which, I wouldn't be surprised by, not because of Mike, but because of just people in general, that kind of story is common enough that I wouldn't be surprised if that happened. The other allegation was that Mike was generally abusive or something. Can't remember. I don't want to spread rumors. All this could be lies, by the way. The other allegation that I think I talked about was that he made some posts that were racist and similar to Alina's posts, and that says something about him and his personality. So might that be true as well? Yeah. I mean, who knows? But the thing that I always say is the fact that one of these cast members has been discovered to have extremely common behavior and viewpoints should not surprise us. Like, I think 90 Day Fiancé, one of its one of the methods to make it appealing to the masses is to strip everyone of those kinds of identities. We never get an indication of, is this person a Democrat or Republican if they're from the United States? That's a very important detail in terms of today's landscape, in terms of identity. A lot of people are, very much identify as a liberal or a conservative. Or we don't even really find out about their jobs. They'll list software engineer, but they don't talk about it that often. And of course, that would be a big part of someone's life, particularly when people are coming together and marrying, they're talking about finances. We also don't learn about finances. Like, in particular, we don't learn, are these people upper class? Sometimes you can kind of tell by where they're living. But anyway, my point is that they effectively strip the identity so that anyone can watch it and identify with that person. Because if we did see those identities, a good number of people would they couldn't stand watching them because they don't want to see people in other echo chambers. Anyway, point is that when we find out that a character like Mike or Alina has racist attitudes or has erratic behavior behind the scenes, that should not surprise us. Particularly when you're looking at someone like Mike, because it sounds like he, who knows, but when you hear about a guy who had troubles growing up and has avoided, he didn't say, I just needed to take a break from dating because my job was so consuming. He wasn't saying that. He's just like, I haven't dated since, and I really didn't even date when I was, so basically this is the first relationship I've ever been in. And we can just imagine that there's some emotional issues there, right? Immaturity, insecurity, something, I don't know, but it's par for the course. The average person will have meltdowns when they get drunk and when they feel hurt by their partner emotionally. That's the average. So the fact that this happens behind the scenes, we shouldn't be like, oh, big scandal. We should be like, well, yeah, what do you think that, some characters like, Darcy or Paul, for example, they will show their behavior on camera. We shouldn't be surprised when people's off-camera behavior isn't necessarily represented with their on-camera behavior. Anyway, and when you consider the possibility of Mike having issues and traumas that led him to avoid dating, that, because how old is he? He's like mid-30s right now. Anyway, to start dating in your mid-30s when you've always wanted to, which it seems, because some people, they're just not interested. They're, aromantic. There's asexuality, there's aromanticism. Anyway, so if you're allo-romantic and you're interested in other people, but you avoid it, why is that true? Well, it's probably because of a lot of relational traumas. And so that could get triggered when you finally do start dating. And when you are out of the game for so long and you start dating, you're basically that of a 14-year-old, and you will react kind of that way, without wisdom, without experience, without the ability to regulate your emotions because they're all kind of new to you. And so that's what I'll say about that. And I feel bad, for all those involved. If Jimena is experiencing abuse, that's obviously horrific and awful. If Mike is having meltdowns and having a really rough time and no one is there to really help him, I feel bad for him as well. So, you know. Darcy and Stacy, tell all. Anonymous upper tier patron Sahana from Vancouver, British Columbia wrote in and says, I can't help but feel very triggered by what feels like deep injustice done towards Georgie. It seems like they go after him from every angle possible and systematically pelt him with verbal and emotional abuse. But the worst for me is the seeming power imbalance that exists. As a person of color, seeing two white women continuously pile on an immigrant while claiming that they need to be treated better is really drilling down on the blindness of the colonial narrative. However, what I don't get is what Georgie is being driven by to stay in this relationship. Do you have any conceptualization of this? P.S. As much as I love your videos, I think I need to stop watching the Darcy and Stacy ones for my own well-being. But rest assured, I'll be clicking as fast as humanly possible for all the other ones. Haha. Thanks, Sahana. Yeah, so what do I say? Well, first off, I get the feeling of, I don't know if I want to watch this anymore. I've said that in the reaction videos. I think midway through this season, I started to have that feeling, related back to what I was talking about earlier, where you feel like you're falling out of love. I'm not in love with Darcy and Stacy, but there's a motivation, right? You feel, it's sort of like when you have a job, right? And you like your job. But there's a bit of an obligation there. You have to show up on time. You have to do certain things, but you like it and you like the people. And sometimes it's this feeling starts to emerge in you, like, I don't know if I like this job anymore. It's, you know, I'm getting kind of burnt out. The cons are outweighing the pros at this point, and I feel like my reaction to the Darcy and Stacy story and the Darcy story overall, in the beginning, for many episodes, I was totally in. I was totally in it, you know, and I guess was interested, and it was enough grist for the mill for me to talk about things. But after the second season, I started to, go, what's going on? But I had hope, I had hope. And then the third season, I was like, oh no, are we? And then I was like, oh, well, maybe we're turning around, And then by the end of the season, it all just started happening, and just in its worst form, its most seemingly delusional form yet. I mean, the basis for their bullying of Georgie, at least what we can see on the television show, is completely baseless, as you know that I've been ranting about. And so, one, that's just hard to watch, because I've been saying this before in other videos, that if we sort of dip in and out of abuse, like with Danielle Muhammad, somehow if you just sort of dip in and out, like it's just 45 minutes of my life one day, or however long it is, somehow it doesn't. Plus, even the Danielle and Muhammad story, at least I felt like there was a progression to it. It felt like I kind of understood where each person was coming from. But with the Darcy and Georgie story, it's so stagnant and awful. And but then again, so they broke up, and that leaves the possibility, like, are they going to have season 4? I mean, the way that this season ended, it just felt like, I mean, the producers must know, maybe even before the season even began, this might be the last hurrah, because we don't have anything to go off of. I mean, the whole season just seemed like one big manufactured, I don't know what. And so I suspect, who knows, the producer, but you got to squeeze every drop out of that orange, right? And there's probably a lot more money to be made. If they had a season 4, would people watch it? I bet you they would. So, but if Darcy dates someone else, and then I get hope, and I'm like, maybe it'll work out this time. Maybe there'll be some magic, sauce that will work between her and someone else, and she can finally take responsibility or whatever. But then as I say that out loud, I'm like, there's no evidence that that'll happen ever. I mean, it's interesting to watch on this show, because with Darcy, she shows so much humanity and so much vulnerability at times. But then at the same time, as far as I can remember after watching her for, however many of hundreds of hours, she has shown the least ability to take responsibility and look at herself. Even just a question mark, like, I wonder what I did there. You know, even with people like Danielle Muhammad, for example, you'll see some inkling, maybe not overt. I'm trying to remember with Danielle Muhammad, or Angela, for example, there will be moments where Angela will say like, oh, you know, maybe yeah. I mean, it's not satisfying, but there's at least an acknowledgement, you know, some kind of bone, you know, throw me a bone kind of thing. You know, give me any indication that you understand that you have a personality. You know, it just seems like it's just like, huh? And that is hard to watch. It's hard to feel good about, hard to feel any optimism around, you know? And so anyway, but you also bring up the angle, which is seeing two white women continuously pile on and bully an immigrant is triggering, which, yeah, I can imagine. Celebrity says, Darcy buying an expensive ring for her to wear. Let me back up. I hope the best for Darcy. I really do. I suspect that therapy is in her future. I, in a way, almost kind of hope that this most recent, because it almost, if you're Darcy and this relationship, and the relationship was real, which we don't know, and dissolved, which it seems like it has between her and Georgie, then it's a pretty good opportunity to say, well, what's going on here? You know, should I go to therapy? And with the way that she looked in the tell-all, I don't know, she looked down. And although I don't wish that on her, of course, but maybe it's a good opportunity. Maybe it'll really motivate her to really go to therapy and find someone who doesn't just praise her the whole time and blame the other people. Do you know what I mean? Who knows? But I don't know, like, but then when I say that out loud, I've thought that before, and there's been zero evidence. I think the defenses for Darcy, and also the systemic defenses in the family system, are so strong that I don't think she is able. The one angle I could imagine, this is just fan fiction at this point, is that the other daughter, what's her name? The younger daughter, Aspen, she seems level-headed, and if she were, and it's a huge burden to put on her, but you just wonder if she were able to talk with her mom and just be like, so Mom, you know, I care about you, and of course I support you in everything you do, and yeah, all those men were jerk faces, and I just wonder if you ever feel like you have support from others so that you could speak your truth really, and also spend the time to look at yourself in a way that doesn't shame yourself, in a way that recognizes that you have flaws, but that doesn't mean you're a horrible person. I mean, of course, when I say it, it's like, that's too much for a kid to have to do, obviously. You just hope a therapist do that anyway. Celebrity says, Darcy buying an expensive ring for her to wear. How is that her spending money on Georgie? Isn't that her spending money on herself? Am I really to believe Georgie was the one who insisted she buy a super expensive ring? Right. I don't know if I said this in the video, but that's what I was thinking, that was this huge, you know, bomb that Sean was dropping, or not Sean, but Sean was trying to pry out of. It's, you know, everyone agreed, including Sean, like, oh my God, you bought your own engagement ring and you put $10,000 down. That's disgraceful. You know, oh, my heart is, you know, I'm gonna faint. And it's like, who here believes that Georgie demanded that? And because so it's $10,000 down. Let's just say it's a $50,000 ring. That Georgie demanded that Darcy buy a $50,000 ring. Who here thinks that Georgie bought a cheaper ring with his credit card and Darcy looked at it and said, or maybe even Darcy had it appraised and said this, because sometimes you look, it's really hard to tell if diamonds are, it's really hard to tell the difference between diamonds and cubic zirconium or synthetic diamonds. Anyway, point is that at some point, she probably thought, I want a better ring. And so she went out and bought a ring, and he was like, well, if you want to do that, that'd be great. But, who knows what really happened. But that was another reason to bully Georgie from afar, was that she spent $10,000 down on her. Anyway, you were all there. The Lucy says, let's all call it zoo landing. Right. So I was like, can we just come up with a different word other than gaslighting? Because that's not gaslighting, people. Stop using gas. In fact, people are using gaslighting for a variety of situations in the lay public. We have a clinical definition of gaslighting. Can you just use it? Just use a different word. There's a lot of words that society comes up with, like LOL or all the words really, right, that are outside of the clinical world. Texting. I've been alive long enough. I remember when texting. Imagine a world in which texting meant nothing. Like, what do you mean texting? That's not a word. We invented a word called texting. Well, or bullying, for example. At some point, someone came up with the word bullying. And we can come up with these words. We don't have to co-opt words in my field that actually have rigorous definitions and research around and just use it for something else. So I was saying, can we just come up with a different word? And the Lucy Who says, let's call it zoo landing. When everyone's reality is so distorted, the rational person is made to appear as the crazy one. Right. So, or maybe the Lucy was just saying, let's just come up with this word, that what's happening to Georgie is he's being zoo landed. Yeah, I like it. SG says, Dr. Honda, we love you and appreciate these daily videos. I'm with you regarding the stopping of reacting to Darcy and Stacy. I think we have learned enough jumping off points from them. They have been redundant with their issues, and we haven't seen much growth. Right. Agreed, SG. Love is blind. Listener Charlotte emailed in and said, at the end of the video, you mentioned a common schema about not getting acceptance from parents in childhood and the effects it can have on adult life. Would you be able to share the name of that schema or recommend readings on the topic? Yeah, so you can find online, just Google schema therapy, and there's a fair amount of good resources. It's not one of those things that has been bastardized by the internet, to my knowledge. And there are a number of different schemas that could be identified in terms of what I was talking about, but the main one is called emotional deprivation. It's one of the 18 schemas put forward by Jung, in that, I have some questions here that if you say yes to these, you might have this schema. And of course, you want to talk with a therapist about it. But I've never had a consistent person to depend on for advice and emotional support. Generally speaking, no one has ever really been there to meet my emotional needs. I haven't gotten enough love or nurturance from others, and so on. That if you're like, yeah, that's me, oh my God, yeah, that's a theme in my life, is I've never felt that someone was consistently there for me, then you might be suffering from emotional deprivation schema, meaning that early in life you were emotionally deprived of warmth and attunement and attention, such that you develop this general schema, this general belief system about how the world is and yourself, such that you think you've never had it. And what can happen is that you can either be getting emotional attention, but you don't see it because you don't expect to see it, or because you expect people to deprive emotions and warmth from you, you'll be triggered. Like if you have emotional deprivation schema and your partner is stressed out, then instead of seeing it like, oh, I'm fine, but my partner is stressed out, and they'll recover and they'll eventually be loving towards me again. If you have this emotional deprivation schema, when you experience that in your partner, you might get extremely angry because it reminds you of what happened in the past, and it feels you're interpreting their withdrawal as them purposely withdrawing from you instead of just withdrawing because of their own stress. because of the schema based on what you went through when you were a child, when it was accurate when you were 5, but not accurate when you're 25. And then you get hurt, and then you get angry, and then you yell at your partner, and then they do withdraw from you. And then that you rinse and repeat that over time. And by the time you're 45, you've never had anyone really there for you, because not only do you not interpret the world in a way that allows for that to happen, but you also, through a self-fulfilling prophecy, actually push people away, or you actually might avoid relationships altogether. That's called emotional deprivation schema. There are 17 others, according to Jung. And by the way, the items that I just read are my own items that I use in my practice, not necessarily the ones that Jung talks about, but they're basically the same. Love is Blind. Jessica wrote in and says, and by the way, I don't know if I told y'all, but I was on Jessica's podcast. This is a different Jessica, but the Jessica from season 1, she had me on her podcast. And I asked her a lot of questions about what it was like for her. It was interesting. And I feel bad for every cast member on all these shows for the amount of bullying they go through. I mean, it's one thing to sit there, I've said this before, it's one thing to watch the show and to be like, oh, you Colt. It's another thing to go after them as a crowd of people, like thousands of people just bullying someone, or seeing them in person and yelling at them. Like, what are you doing, people? Like, do you not understand what you're doing to someone? Like, people just need to, like, I don't know, what is it? What is it? Immaturity? Is it desperation? Is it hurt people? Is it this normalization of this kind of online bullying of famous people? Is it the notion that famous people don't have feelings? I just don't understand. It's like, they're human beings. Like, just stop. You know? I mean, it's almost like people confuse it with, like, fiction or something. You know, when you see Darth Vader, you'd be like, oh, Darth Vader, you. And you can't differentiate between fiction. I don't know. Anyway, I just wish people had that little, that little idea in their head of just like, well, don't attack that's a real human being. Like, let's not, like, it's sort of actually going back to Star Wars and Darth Vader, when the kid actor who played young Anakin in The Phantom Menace, the movie was so hated, we all understand. It's since been kind of loved by, especially as younger people start to age, because that trilogy was their trilogy. And the point is that he was, from my memory, so bullied at the beginning of the internet that he started to feel really bad about him. So people started attacking the actor, the kid, because they hated the movie. And I just wish people would just, like, yeah. So if you ever see that, by the way, online, or you hear people talking about that, or you see evidence of, like in the comments below my videos, if you see someone like, oh, that person's a piece of crap, I hope that at the very least you don't support it. And maybe at best you're like, hey, I agree that this person is very triggering, but let's be careful to not attack. These are human beings, and we should all just be nice to each other. I just can't imagine people doing that, but I think we should try to start shifting our culture away from the mainstream culture of reality TV show watching. Anyway, am I just saying random stuff? Jessica says, Jarrett likes claiming this conversation with Mallory was a joke. I fail to see what the punchline was, though. This is just straight up flirting. Poor Sal. Yeah, it definitely looked like flirting, and it didn't look like a joke. And I think I have faith in Jarrett that if we could really just sit him down, he'd be like, yeah, that wasn't good. I mean, he seems like a good person, but I think he's trying to save face, or he's trying to maybe even save Ayana's feelings, because to admit it was flirting right in front of Ayana, you could imagine him just being like, it was a joke, let's just move on. Like, because what I think about is just the extreme emotional weirdness of that situation. For 10 days, you're in pods, having romantic feelings for various different people. You have no contact with the outside world. It's a total deprivation chamber. And then he falls in love with Mallory and Ayana, proposes to Mallory, essentially gets turned down, proposes to Ayanna, gets accepted, has to kind of convince Ayanna, like, no, it's this whole up and down roller coaster. He's thinking about the rest of his life. It's like, okay, growing old, having kids, all this stuff. Is just, He has never seen Mallory or Ayanna in person. He doesn't know what they look like. They're just kind of, faceless voices that he's falling in love with. That first day they come out of the pods, he sees Ayanna for the first time. You just imagine the overwhelming emotions of that. That night, they all get hammered at a bar. My impression is it's maybe even their first time outside. Like, I think to some extent they're not even allowed outside. I don't know. But anyway, they're getting hammered, and he sees Mallory for the first time. And he just proposed to her probably just a couple days earlier or something. And so he still has feelings, and, but in his head, I'm like, well, I'm with Ayanna. And he showed that. I was worried that something weird would happen, but he showed that he was in it to win it from the very beginning with Ayanna. He never strayed from that. But his first time meeting Mallory, he still has some feelings. And he's like, hey, you passed on me, and you shouldn't have passed on me. And Sal is not your type, I don't think. And I'm getting this vibe that you're not into Sal, which I think was true. And you said no to me because you said you wanted to be with Sal, I think is how it played out. And so you could imagine that for Jarrett, he would be in that kind of emotional space. At the end of the day, he's like, well, that was, what would be a situation? Let's say that you are married for 10 years and your partner breaks up with you, and then you meet someone else. Years later, you're with that person for a while, and then you meet up with your former partner, for coffee or something, and or maybe drinks, and you kind of reminisce, and there's a little bit of a flirty energy, but in your heart, you're like, I don't want to be with my former partner. I still have a little bit of a spark there, but I'm in love with my current partner, but I still have, there's something there, but I don't want to be with that person, And, anyway, point is that, so for Jarrett, it's like, what do you say? You probably said, well, it was a joke. Let's move on. Anonymous listener emailed in and said, I've been waiting for you to talk about Danielle and Nick because I am Danielle in so many ways, and I am in a similar relationship as she is. Right from the anxious jealousy to feeling like I am never good enough or deserving, and spending hours crying alone over something as silly as not getting a text back. And literally what you said in the video, I do, and I've done many times. I appreciate so much the validation you provided at the end. It made me cry and want to find a therapist that can help me with that. Well, good for you, anonymous listener who emailed in. That, preoccupied attachment, anxious attachment is an extremely common thing. So is avoidant attachment. Attachment insecurity is a very common thing. And the people, when we're suffering from it, we often feel like there's something wrong with us and that we just have to have willpower over it or something. And it's one of those things that I wish that we, in schools, we teach math for how many years? Like, you have an hour of math literally every day from second grade to 10th grade. I think someone's calling me on my phone. My phone started to talk to me. I'm like, what's happening? And someone's calling me, but I don't recognize that number, so I'll just let it go to voicemail. Anyway, I think it should be an hour of attachment theory every day from second grade to 10th grade. Or at least an hour a week. Like, the fact that we don't teach this stuff, I find to be bizarre, really. Like, if aliens look down, they're like, you've come up with a whole field of research called attachment theory that the awareness would really help with a lot of issues. Like, a lot of issues, not only just the Danielles and the Nicks, but literally everyone on the show. Our reactions to our bosses, our reactions to our employees, our reactions to other nations, anyway. Chloe says, Let's see. I saw a lot of my previous self in Danielle and my husband in Nick. When this happened a couple times with my now husband, he told me that if I didn't see a therapist to work on this, he didn't think it would work out between us. With his support and 7 years of therapy, I finally got to a place where I don't have these sorts of feelings anymore. And when I do, I have the tools to regulate. I hope Danielle can do the same. Yeah, good for you, Chloe. Megan says, glad I'm not the only one who finds the overuse of the word toxic annoying. It feels like a word used to automatically demonize anything someone doesn't like. Yeah, gaslighting, toxic, narcissism, these words, they're just like these bombs that I have been recent, like in the past few years. And you're having a conflict, which, can be difficult. And then you just pull out this word and see like, you're gaslighting. In fact, the time that I thought was the most poignant that I saw was between Trisha Paytas and Ethan on Frenemies. I did a reaction, and one of them said, you're gaslighting me. And the other said, and the other one said, you're gaslighting me. I was just like, so at what point can we just do away with the word? Because apparently it doesn't mean anything, These words like, oh, you're so toxic. And I just wish people would not use labels like that and would just kind of just describe your experience. Like, I feel like you're being mean. I feel like you're being inconsiderate. Like, I grew up with words. I don't know if this is just me being old man shakes his fist at cloud moment, but when I was growing up, words like inconsiderate or lying or deception were big words. These were big words to say, like, I think you're deceiving me right now. I think you're holding back. I think you're lying to me right now. I think you're being mean. You're being unfair. I feel like those words when I was growing up were pretty big bombs to say because they were accurate. But somehow I think in our public discourse, these words get thrown around like candy and they lose all meaning. And so people, I don't know, I think they're coming up with these other words because they want something stronger, because the real words have lost all meaning and have lost all impact. You're deceiving me. You're deceiving me. Fake news. And so we're like, well, I gotta ramp it up. Okay, narcissism. You're being mean. Well, actually, you're narcissistic. It's not that you're just being mean to me right now, or you're deceiving me, or you're being unfair or inconsiderate. You're narcissistic. It's not that I feel very upset right now and I'm really hurt, and I feel like you're being aggressive a little bit or a little hostile with me. You're being toxic. It's these labels, and whenever they're used, I find it to be, it's always a sign. Always. Well, that's kind of a sad state of affair, because there are toxic situations and there is a thing called narcissism. So, but in the lay public and online, I've never seen it used in a way, or at least to my memory, in a way that was accurate. To me, it's very frequently an indication that someone just wants to end the conversation. They want to win. They want to win the argument, and they just want to use a label like, I was the first person to throw out the toxic card, and that means you have now lost. And I'm like, that's not how you work things out. And of course, with Danielle and Nick, they apparently have been through a lot of therapy since being on the show, and them being on the reunion actually kind of showed that. Because I was expecting to see a lot of fighting or reports of that, but in a rare twist, someone on the show actually not only went to therapy, but went to therapy for a long time. There's also people saying that they're both in individual therapy and have been for a long time. So, yeah. And because the issues that Nick and Danielle seem to exhibit are extremely easy to fix. I mean, these are things that I can fix in like 1.5 sessions. It's so easy to just be like, hey, okay, here's... Now, we might need a lot more sessions to kind of lock it in and really continue to refine it. But the detection and me conveying and them understanding can be done very quickly. I could do that honestly in 7 minutes with some couples. Anyway, my point, I'm not, there's nothing different about me. All good couples therapists can do that. And my point is that good for them. Turley says, ugh, this is very relatable to me between Danielle and Nick. I always think everyone will always leave me eventually. It's so hard. I always reject myself before someone else can. Right, so going back to schema, that's the abandonment instability schema, which is typified by the following statements. I worry that people I feel close to will leave me or abandon me. I expect close relationships to end. I feel lonely. Those are all, and others are indicative of that schema having been developed by actual abandonment growing up, and then you expect it to happen even when it's not happening, and are very triggered by things that look like abandonment when it's not actual abandonment, and then you get very angry, and then people abandon you, and you're like, see, people abandon me. Catherine says, oh boy, Dr. Honda making me evaluate myself again, LOL. Last night, my husband wasn't feeling well, and my first instinct was to fix him, fix a situation, which he didn't really need. Then, when he wasn't joking around like normal, I went into my head and started trying to figure out what I did to make him angry. Of course, the real answer was that he wasn't feeling great and just felt like being quiet. I know I have traumas around this and have always framed it as anxiety, but maybe I need to explore my own attachment, perhaps in therapy. I love these videos. Right, so Catherine, so there are different steps that I see people go through, and you've gone now maybe to step 3 or 4, where the first step is I'm right, okay? And then eventually you're like, I think I have anxiety. And then the third step is I think I have attachment anxiety. It's not just I'm high strung or I have anxiety. It's like I have attachment reactivity that distorts my vision. I don't just get afraid of things. I actually see things that aren't there. You're not delusional like schizophrenic. We all do this, but when you have significant attachment issues from your childhood, you will see things and react to things that aren't there. Like what you're saying, your husband isn't feeling well. It causes you to have attachment anxiety because you're like, oh crap, from my past, that indicates that very bad things are going to happen to me in my relationships. So I'm hypervigilant. I need to fix the situation so that I don't lose my partner. That causes you to try to fix it. And he's just like, I don't need you to fix it. Will you stop? And then that does push him away. And then you get angry and you're like, look, you're doing it to me. You're unfair. And then he's just like, ugh, So good for you for identifying that. I'm excited for all y'all that are learning and are changing and are bettering your relationships and are benefiting you and your partners. But think of how few people know about this kind of stuff and how many people are just suffering. Imagine Nick and Danielle without therapy. Oh boy, right? And they're normal. That's a very normal problem. The Nick and Danielle problem is a very normal problem. So it just makes me sad that we live in a society that values things like the new iPhone and refuses to talk about attachment security. It's just like bizarre. One has literally nothing to do with happiness, and the other one has everything to do with happiness. Anyway. Shayna Yikes video at Love is Blind. Army says, I think I'll judge my future actions by asking myself if Dr. Kirk would go yikes to me or not. I'm trying to be better, y'all. I don't know if that's such a great thing to go off of, because a lot of people think I would say yikes to things that I wouldn't, particularly if you're ashamed of something, you were made to feel ashamed of something. Like I would have clients that would come in and say, I'm so embarrassed, I'm going to tell you something. And I'd be like, oh, and they tell me, I'm like, why are you embarrassed to tell me that? It's not even your fault. And so, but it's not a bad thing to go off of, I guess. Honestly, one of the things I was telling a friend of mine who is suffering is I was telling him that if you want a good guide emotionally, is your own kids. And I know a lot of you will attest to this, that if you have kids age, 3 to 7, often, if you've raised them well enough, they have a very free emotional expression. They haven't been beaten down by society and by school and by, cyberbullying or whatever, to the point where when they're sad, they exhibit their sadness very quickly. They'll start crying. When they're angry, it's apparent. when they're happy, they laugh. When they enjoy, when they see a cute animal, they're like, oh, cute animal. They don't hold back. Something happens between 5 and 15. By the time they're 15-year-olds, on average, not always, they're like, whatever, I don't, even though they have all those same feelings, right? And then by the time you're 25, you're like, I'm a business, I'm going to be a success, like society and materialism and capitalism and the echo chamber and trying to look good on Instagram, like it just ruins people. And so, but 5-year-olds don't have that yet. And so if you want a good guide on like, how should I feel? What's the right thing to do? It's not always the right thing to follow, but ask yourself, what would a 5-year-old do? Would a 5-year-old cry? And you're trying not to cry because you're trying to be strong? It's a good indication you've been brainwashed. Listen, what would the 5-year-old do? 5-year-old cry. If the 5-year-old, now also the 5-year-old doesn't want to go to work and wants to eat cookies all night, but the point is that, well, I don't know, maybe that is a thing. Point is that I'd never said that to someone before, and it really resonated with him, and so I don't know, but I just add that to your repertoire. Instead of thinking about what I would say, because I don't know if that's such a, anyway. Mike and Jimena, another Mike and Jimena video. So I was like, oh, because I heard Jimena say, take care of yourself, or take care in Spanish, and I was like, how do you say it? So the new Mexican Texan says, Spanish speaker here, love the ending. What you were trying to say is cuidate. So I was saying cuidate, but it's cuidate. So take care of yourself is cuidate. It's kind of cool. This is kind of a beauty, that cuidate. And the fact that it's one word, take care of yourself, cuidate, like, that's kind of cool. It's just one word. Carolina, I mean, that sort of means something, right? It's like that your language values something enough that they actually dedicate a word to that idea. Carolina says, yes, please do different languages at the end. I give you the German version in case you ever want to use it. Well, we're at the end, so passt gut auf ich auf ihr Ab es verdient. Now, I'm positive I butchered that, but yeah. Maybe we could do this. So comment and or email in different languages, and I'll do it at the end. So everyone out there, passt gut auf ich auf ihr Ab es verdient. Because you do, you really do.